Howdy, SSM 406. In this lecture, I want to give you some background on Rothman's approaches to community intervention. It's really the core reading for this unit because it talks about three different broad strategies that can be used to affect change. Rothman came up with this typology when he was working as a social worker in the 1960s and early 70s. He applied these strategies for many years and became really famous in the field of social work. Now, the essay I'm having you read is about 30 years later, and he's reflecting back on the different approaches. And he defines these three approaches, but he also says it's often not just one approach that is used, but a campaign or strategy that involves multiple approaches. Now, this work is really well known in social work, but not necessarily outside of that field. However, I think this could be really useful for thinking about different kinds of actions that you or other people might take to affect environmental change or environmental policy change. So the first approach that he talks about is what he calls locality development. And what he means by locality development is that people are working within their own communities and trying to make change at the very local level. A classic example of locality development that some of you, maybe you go on a spring break trip where you go to a poor area somewhere in the US or somewhere in the developing country, and you help build a school or teach kids English or work at an orphanage or something like that. You're engaging in locality development. Locality development could also be getting people together and organizing them to talk about their problems. It might even involve a little bit of talking to elected representatives to ask for more support. And that's locality development, working at a very local level. And it's one of those approaches. And some of you may be working on environmental policy problems, just trying to get people to work together. And we have a lot of different readings in the last unit about how communities can really work together and solve environmental problems on their own. And just getting those people to work together might be the solution. The second strategy that he provides is what he calls social planning or social policy. Now, social planning or policy means that experts are going to sit around in a room and make a decision about what should be done. And those experts could be elected officials, they could be scientists, they could be community leaders, and they're going to make a plan for fixing the problems in the community or in the society. And this is actually how a lot of environmental decision making is done. A classic example here is in the social planning or policy approach for the environment is when we look at endangered species and when we're going to list an endangered species. Several biologists will get together, create a document on the requirements on the habitat of this species. And then we engage in a social planning process. And we don't necessarily call it that, but that's really what Rothman is trying to encapsulate in here and put together a bunch of government documents that say these are the regulations about interacting with this endangered species. Now, the third one that Rothman looks at is what he calls social action. Now, social action, as you might tell from the name, is a little bit more confrontational. And it's when we get organized local people to work together in a social action, but it might be more in the form of a protest or writing into your legislators, writing into governments, writing into your policymakers, and making demands so they know that maybe there's a polluting facility that they want to build, and there's a big campaign to stop that facility from being built in your community. Now that's engaging in social action. And of course, you see this all the time in environmental policy. Now, just a warning about applying the ideas from this reading, because it's going to be a super valuable one for you, but I want to make sure that if you write it in your essay that you want people to engage in social action, I want you to be really specific. What is the social action that you want people to engage in? Is it writing legislators? Do you want them to hold a protest? Do you want them to raise money? And what are they actually going to do with all that? So I want you to get away from the general terms and really think specifically about how you want to apply these different social actions, all the three of the Rothman principles. So I hope that helps you think through a little bit more about what the 3 Rothman approaches are. And I'll ask you about it on the quiz, and I hope that some of you can use it in the writing of your memo. Happy writing!